Hello everyone.
Hello everyone.
Thank you for joining EducationUSA Ukraine
Thursday lectures.
I hope you're all doing fine, healthy, and you have a wonderful Thursday. Today we have an interesting topic. I think we don't have it very often. And if you are planning to continue your higher education at PhD level in the United States, you might already know that the research topic and research proposal is a very essential part of your application package, and sometimes it might be very challenging to decide on a topic. So it is appealing to the university and it meets all requirements from the university. And we hear a lot of questions about on how to write a research proposal. So today we have two wonderful speakers, Dr. Bradley Swanson, Director of Graduate Studies and Professor of Biology, and Dr. Ling Zhang, Director of Graduate and International Recruitment at Central Michigan University. And you will have a wonderful opportunity to hear about the research proposals on how to write them, to hear about the Central Michigan University, and to have a wonderful opportunity to ask your own questions. So Dr. Swanson, you can go ahead. I just want to remind everybody that you have a chat box and you can leave your questions in the chat box and we will get back to the questions at the end of the presentation.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So, welcome to everybody out there listening. Please do ask questions as we are going along. I have some slides, but I think the most informative way to do most of this is by asking specific questions that you have. So, I thought one of the first things we should do is try and look at what is a research proposal, but probably more importantly is what is not a research proposal. So what isn't it? It's not going to be a contract that you are going to be required to do that research which you describe when you come to the research program. Whatever program you come to, you're not going to necessarily have to do exactly what you talked about in that research proposal. So for example, for my research proposal, I proposed to work in Yellowstone National Park on Yellowstone National Park. I ended up working in southeastern Arizona, 1,500 miles away, on kangaroo rats. That's about as diverse and divergent as you could possibly get. So don't feel like you are boxing yourself into the exact project which you are talking about. Okay. Because what the research proposal is it's really more of a way for the universities and the admission committees, the faculty members that you're interacting with, it's a way for them to try and evaluate. And in particular, what they're trying to look at is they're trying to look at your critical thinking skills. So how well are you thinking out the concepts that you want to be able to address? And again, these are not necessarily what you will address, but can you think critically about the issues or the concepts that you want to do your PhD on? They're using this to get an idea of the general knowledge you have in the field. So they want to see how well you have read the literature that's out there and is relevant to the field that you have. And again, it doesn't have to be the exact specific one you're going to work in, but that you have deep knowledge about one field and that you are ready to start trying to work on that PhD. They want to look at your ability to generate interesting questions. So is it a question that's worth a PhD? Is it a question that hasn't already been answered? So you need to go through the literature and make sure that there aren't already published papers that are addressing that exact type of question. And again, I'm just going to keep reiterating, it doesn't mean it's going to be the one you work on. They want to see if you can develop appropriate methods to be able to answer that question that you are asking. So have you enough background in the techniques that might be needed, in the statistical methods that might be needed, in the interviewing techniques if you're doing something more along the social sciences, but do you have the ability to apply the appropriate methods to address the questions which you are producing? They are also using this to evaluate your ability to write and convey complex information. A PhD is a big undertaking. It's going to be many years of your life, anywhere from 3 to 7 to 10 in some cases. And you're given that amount of time that you're putting in, producing a lot of complex concepts, and they want to make sure that you're well enough to be able to convey that information to the committee who's going to be making those evaluations. They want to make sure that you understand what's involved in a PhD. So at my PhD program, the faculty were very, very comfortable in letting their graduate students propose things that were completely unrealistic. And they would let those students work on them for a while and wait until the students figured out, I'm never going to finish this. My project working in Yellowstone on red foxes was really cool. It would have taken me 15 years to complete it. When I finally figured that out, I went and I had a better understanding of what's really needed and what's doable, and I switched to working on kangaroo rats in Arizona. So they want to make sure that you are realistic in what you want to, on what you're proposing. And I was completely unrealistic. It was really rather ridiculous what I was trying, what I said I was going to do. But they were good enough to let me try it and learn that on myself. But you don't want to be saying that you're going to be doing something that's going to be eligible for a Nobel Prize in your research proposal. That's not realistic for most people at that stage. So think about it and be realistic about it. So there's 3 main things that a research proposal needs to be. It needs to be clear. You have to have your writing convey everything as clearly as possible. You're going to be writing to people who are experts in the field, though. So all disciplines have a lot of jargon, have a lot of words that are really unique only to those fields, whether it's biology, chemistry, history, anthropology, social sciences. They all have their own unique languages. You can use those complex words when you're trying to convey the issues, but try to make sure that things are still as clear as possible. We have those unique language, we have those unique terms in each field so that we can say things more concisely as well. So you want to make this short. The shorter these things tend to be, the better. I mean, you still have to get all of the information in. So we're not talking about you're going to have a 2 or a 3-page research proposal typically, but you want to make it as concise, as brief as possible. The committees, if this is an application for, if this is part of the application for a PhD program, the admissions committee might be reading dozens of these. They are going to want them to be as short as possible while still being clear, but also bringing across all of the information that's needed so that they can evaluate it. So try to think about how to be concise in your writing, but at the same time, you still have to make it beautifully written, as I like to say. So I tell my students I expect 3 things in everything they write. It's clear, it's concise, and it's beautifully written. I don't mean script like you're seeing on the page right now, obviously, but it's the writing style is such that things flow well from one point to the next, to the next, to the next. So think about the quality of the writing. Go back, doing some simple things like going from active voice to passive voice can shorten your writing dramatically. I went to the store instead of I have gone to the store. It shortens everything up and it keeps the reader more involved. So using an active voice rather than a passive voice tends to keep your readers more involved. It's going to make things a little more clear. It's going to make them a little more concise as well. So when we talk about a research proposal, what you're going to be developing is going to be dramatically different whether you are applying for a PhD in music or art history or biology or physics or anthropology or political science or anything like that. So there's not really a way for me to talk about this in a fashion where I can say these are going to be the sections that every person is going to produce, because it's very dependent upon the field that you are entering. So we're going to talk about conceptual aspects of the research proposal rather than what the actual sections might be called. So the first thing you have is a title, and I can use this one because everybody has to have a title. In the title, you want to make it two things. You want to make it interesting, but you also need to make it informative. So you have to have a title that is going to catch the eye of people, that's going to make them want to read more. This is true whenever you're writing papers or publications or anything like that. The first thing that people see is the title, and that title has to have enough information that makes them interested in wanting to read more. So put some effort into your title. It has to be professional, but it still has to have enough of a hook so that people are going to be more intrigued with it. After that, there's going to be introductory sections of this. And this section is more or less where you're going to state your research question. What is that thing which you want to investigate? With that, you want to make sure that you know that it's producing new information, something that hasn't been done already. And then you want to make sure that you can show where that new information fits into the field that you are looking in, that you are addressing. So what is the new information that you're going to produce? What is the significance of that information? Where is it going to fit in that whole body of work? Okay, so think about it in a broader context. Some of the problems that people have when they are first starting PhD programs is they're coming from undergraduate programs, or maybe they did a master's program. But in both of those cases, they've looked at really often very narrow research questions. They're relatively small questions. When you're talking about a PhD, you're supposed to be producing entire new broad chunks of knowledge. So you need to make sure that you can put that into the context of the field and what the significance of it is. This portion, we don't need a lot of detail in the background, all of the background history. That usually comes in a later section where you're talking about the context of it. So this is really trying to say, here's what I want to do, here's why it's important, here's how it's going to impact the field that I'm working in. So then the next part is going to be the research context. This is the area how your stuff is going to fit in more detail. This is where you're going to be showing what others have done. Okay, so it's what have others done in the field. This is going to convey to the admissions committee or your prospective advisor that you have a deep enough background to be able to address PhD level questions. And in this section, what you're going to really want to do is you want to make this thing a giant funnel. We're going to take this and essentially try and use this funnel concept so that your reader knows what you are going, where you are going by the time you end up finishing this section. So you want to cover the major concepts first. Think about what is the biggest, broadest, overarching theory or concept that you're going to be working with, and start talking about that concept. And then you're going to continuously work your way down in scale. So you start out with a really, really big concept, and then there's going to be a smaller section of that large concept that you're interested in. And you're going to get it smaller again and smaller again, and then maybe getting down to the specific locations where you would be proposing to do this work, or some of the specific areas or organisms that you might be working with, or whatever that might end up being. But the idea should be that by the time you're finishing the research context, that the readers should be able to predict what your thesis statement is going to be. So that means they should be able to predict what your research is going to be on. Your job as the writer is always to make the reader's job as easy as possible. And that's where that clear, concise, and beautifully written comes in, and thinking about this funnel idea. If you're doing that, the reader should be able to predict what your thesis question is going to be before you even get there. Now, one of the biggest things you want to make sure in this section that you don't do, don't oversight things, sorry about that. When you are referencing this material, if it's a concept that's really well known in your field, you don't need to have 4, 5, 6, 7 citations to show the readers that you've read all of these papers, all of these publications, all of this previous work. You really need two, maybe. You might take one that's a classic or an older one and one that's more recent to show that you understand from the beginning of the field to where it is now. One of the biggest problems people often have when they're writing these is they try and put in way too many references and citations, and it breaks up the flow of the document, and it's not needed. The people reading this are going to know where the field is and that you have the important and relevant citations. Avoid plagiarizing. This is the one area where students have the most problem, is that they start pulling items directly out of previously published work. Most programs are going to run your document through a plagiarizing software. So for example, I'm just going to show you this one. Hopefully you can see all the colors. This was one page out of a dissertation that was submitted here at CMU. Everything that's highlighted is plagiarized word for word out of somebody else's document. So this dissertation, this entire PhD dissertation, was returned to the student for the amount of plagiarism that was in there, and they had to rewrite the entire dissertation. You don't want to be in that standpoint. If you do have plagiarized work in your proposal, you're just not going to get in. If they run it through and they find that there's a high level of plagiarism like we see here, you are just not going to be accepted, and it won't matter. But really do this. Now there is a process to try and make sure you minimize that. And basically it's read, wait, and write. So what it means is read the papers that you're thinking about, but don't go and start writing notes on those things right away, or don't start trying to transcribe right away. Read it, wait 10, 15 minutes if there's something that's really, really important that you want to grab. Read it, wait 10 minutes, and then try and write it down. You are not going to remember the exact wording, the exact phrasing that was in there. And so it's going to be much less likely that you end up plagiarizing it. This is something that we have problems with at all levels. We have it at people when they're trying to write their proposals, and all the way through to when they are finishing their doctoral research programs, like you can see here, and still have this issue. Avoid it as much as possible. The next section in the research proposal is typically the approach you're going to take. And the previous one was what have other people done. This one is the what will you do portion of it. Okay, and so you need to explain the details of what you plan on working on. This is going to be different levels and different aspects depending upon the field that you're in. But you always want to make sure that there's a logical flow, that the readers can see how you're getting from the methods to the conclusions, that there is a logical flow. I'm going to do study A, then study B, then study C, and by what I learned from A, B, and C, I'm going to be able to make a conclusion, which is going to allow me to be able to do study D, or whatever it might be. But make sure there's a logical flow to the approach you're going to take. And typically, this is going to be in a format that we would call parallel structure. So the flow that you're going to be taking is often going to be determined by how you described things in the previous section. So if you end up with multiple questions that you're going to be asking as part of your PhD, oftentimes a PhD will be 3 to 4 chapters long, where each chapter is going to be its own publication. So you would have 3 or 4 questions that you would be asking. And you want to make sure that when you're talking about the approach you're going to take to answer those questions, that if you laid it out as question 1, 2, 3, 4, that when you talk about the approach you're going to take, that you talk about it from the standpoint of, here's how I'm going to address question 1. That's going to be your first portion in there. Then you're going to talk about how you're going to address question 2, then how you're going to do question 3, and then how you're going to do question 4. So you want to make the parallel structure flowing in a similar fashion across all of your sections. You want to make sure that you have an appropriate level of detail. This means that you don't have extraneous information that is not really relevant to changing the outcome of the study. I usually tell my students that doesn't matter does that detail matter? If a person reading it didn't know that, would they have trouble understanding what was going on? And if they don't, if they would be able to do it without that detail, don't include it. So for example, saying that you used I don't know, SPSS for your statistical analysis, it's not really going to matter if you used SPSS or you used R or you used SAS or whatever the statistical program is that you use. The important thing is what statistical test you're going to do, not which program you're going to use, because the programs would all give you the same result, whether you used, regardless of which one you use. So you would need to talk about the statistical tests, not necessarily the statistical packages you would use. So think about the appropriate level of detail that you're going to have. And then lastly, make sure that this is going to allow you to be able, or this is going to allow the readers to see how it's going to fill that knowledge gap. So how it's going to advance the field specifically with respect to the larger scale issues, which you indicated was the area that's missing information in the previous sections. So make sure there's a direct tie between the method you're using to how those methods are going to be able to answer the questions which you addressed in the previous section. So make sure, so basically the summary, make sure you show relevance and importance of your research. Grades alone are not going to get you into a PhD program. Grades alone are not going to keep you in the PhD program. One of the first hurdles that you'll often have to have is writing a proposal for your PhD program. And this is often a point where people will be, if you don't do well enough on the proposal, you will probably be asked to leave the program. So for example, when I was doing my PhD program, every single person in the PhD program that was the year ahead of me, not one single one of them made it through. There is a large attrition rate, and most of it was because they weren't able to make the transition to really doing a solid research proposal. So you might have to do one to get into the program, but you're going to have to do another one for when you are actually going to be doing it. These are the things that they care about. Most people, most research programs are going to care more about the research proposals that you are developing than your grades. You have to have the grades to get into the program, but it's not going to be enough. You want to make sure that you tailor your proposal to the strengths of the department in general. So make sure that the proposal you are working on fits with what the faculty in that program do. And you should hopefully have already contacted a specific faculty member who is your major person that you would be interested in working with, so that you can contact them and then make sure that your research proposal fits really well with the questions that they are interested in, so that it's easy to see they are the appropriate person for you. Be clear, be concise, be beautifully written, make sure it's doable. Don't get overly grandiose aspects out of that. But also make sure that your interest and your enthusiasm for this shines out. Make sure that they can see that you are really interested in these questions, that this is the stuff which gets you excited, because you are going to be in this program for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and that's a long time. You want to make sure that they know you are enthusiastic about those aspects. So a couple of hints. Talk to your prospective advisor before you start producing all this stuff. Faculty love getting emails from prospective students, okay? Especially if they're going to be taking students. They want to talk with you before you start the application. So try and find the individuals who are interested, that you are interested in working with, and talk to them. Make sure your proposal is appropriate for their interests. You can have the greatest concept in the world, but if that advisor doesn't feel comfortable in their knowledge level to be able to advise you on the completion of that, it won't matter. They're not going to take you. They're not going to say, oh, this person is exactly who I want because their research dovetails well with me. It's going to be, oh, this is a really cool idea. I wish I had a better handle on it so I could take this person, but I can't be an effective advisor for them. So make sure your proposal is appropriate for their interests. Your writing is not as good as you think it is. None of us are. I see all kinds of levels of writing and students who come in starting their graduate program and they think they are really good writers, and rarely are they very good writers. So and especially for some of you folks who are going to be writing in a second language, I can't even imagine that. The fact that you folks can produce this type of material in a second language is phenomenal. But it also means that you need to really make sure that you are working with that writing. And the best way to do that is to have other people read your proposals. Now, when you have other people reading your proposals, though, I always tell them that if you are reviewing somebody else's proposal or paper or anything like that, your job is to make that person cry. You want to be so brutally honest and harsh in your criticism that maybe you bring that person to tears, because you would much rather have your friend point out all of your horrible mistakes than have these horrible mistakes go forward and have your prospective advisor or the admission committee and the graduate committee read these and find them themselves. Much better always to have friends find it. You're not being a friend if you aren't being harsh with your criticism. And then realize that you're going to have to revise it. This is not a one draft and done. I typically, with my students' proposals, it's almost a 6-month adventure to get from when they arrive to when they have a proposal that's ready to go to their committee. And that's going to probably go through 4, 5, 6 full drafts of the entire proposal before it goes forward. Now, that's again once you're already here. When you're working with this as an application portion, your prospective advisor is not going to read 5, 6, 7, 8 drafts of it. But make sure you send it to your friends. Make sure you send it to other faculty members that you might know from either your undergraduate career or your master's degree, or people who are working in the field. Make sure that people who can critique it do so, and realize that you're probably going to have to go through it time after time after time. One of the most difficult things to do is to critique your own work. You put a lot of time and effort into this. You are invested in the writing that you did. You are convinced it's darn good writing. I have this problem all the time. Everything that I write, I'm convinced, wow, that was brilliant. And what I'll do is I'll take, and between my revisions, I'll wait a week, I'll wait 10 days before I go back, and I'll read it and I'll say, oh, that section doesn't work as well anymore. But I'm still so invested in my writing that I can't delete it. I'll copy it, I'll put it at the end of the paper or my proposal, and then I'll try and rewrite because I'm convinced I'm going to have some place to put that brilliant prose again, and I never do. So that's fine if you do it that way, but take some time in between your revisions so that you can get a clear head and be able to think more concisely and be able to think better about what you need to do. Okay, that brings us to about 10:30, about half our time. So I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you so much for the great presentation, Dr. Swanson. And yes, we will go to our next speaker in a couple of seconds. I just want to remind everybody that you have a unique opportunity to ask your question about the PhD proposal that you might be writing right now. Well, I can go with the questions.
online and I would Google animal dispersal, and I would see who's publishing in it. And that's going to allow me to narrow my focus down to the questions that I'm interested in a little bit more. Then I would try and find those authors. I would go and I would read some of their papers, recent papers though, very recent ones, and see what they're working on and make sure that those questions still interest me. Then I have, rather than sending a full proposal to begin with, because that's kind of intimidating that you're going to send maybe a proposal to a faculty member out of the blue. I have my students write a 3-paragraph email to the instructor, to the advisors or people they think they would like to have as their advisor. And that first paragraph is about them. So it's talking about where did you graduate, what degree did you graduate with, what is your GPA, and essentially what did you do? So what experiences did you have in your previous educational experiences that make it likely that you're going to succeed? So did you work with a professor during your undergraduate? What was your master's thesis on? Did you do an undergraduate thesis? And talk a little bit about that. But that's kind of one paragraph. The second paragraph then is what you want to do. And so that first paragraph, that's going to be very similar. It's going to be basically identical for any faculty member that you contact. That second paragraph is going to be one that is going to be about, here are the questions that interest me. And these you need to make sure that they are appropriate for the faculty member that you're working. So these are going to change a little bit based upon what the each individual faculty member is interested in. So in my field, for example, if somebody does dispersal in animals or animal movement patterns, you don't want to be talking about, oh, I'm really interested in how pollen moves from flower to flower, because that's going to be plant-based. You want to make sure that you're talking about things that are relevant to that professor for your interests. And then that third paragraph, the third paragraph is where you are going to talk to the individual and you're going to let them know why you would be the perfect candidate for their lab. So you're going to take in that third paragraph, you're going to talk about research which they have done. And it has to be in enough detail to know that it isn't just something you found on the internet and you read the abstract, okay? Or you saw a 3-sentence blurb about it. It needs to have enough detail to let them know that you've actually read their work. And you're going to tie in the work that they have done previously to how that is involved with the questions that interest you, so that the two of you would be a good fit for as a mentor or an advisor and a mentee or an advisee. And that way you aren't sending out these giant proposals that are just intimidating to see. So I would say you want it to be, I tell my students, you want it to be one screen, so that that faculty member doesn't even have to scroll up and down on their email thing. So you want it to be one screen's worth of information, 3 paragraphs, me, my interests, why we would be a great fit. And then include also your resume or your CV or something like that so they can see a little bit more detail. If you want, include unofficial copies of transcripts, but even that's not necessary at this point. But this is going to be the stage where those faculty members will get back to you and say, oh, this sounds great, I'd love to talk with you a little bit more. Or they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have any funding, or maybe I don't have, my lab is full right now, my research program doesn't have space for anybody else right now. So that's one way to try and do it without putting in that massive investment, is send a shorter email first to whet their appetite, to make them interested in you. And remember, that first paragraph is selling yourself. That's where you have to convince them that I can do this. And then second paragraph is my interests are this. Third paragraph, my interests pair well with your interests. We would be a good collaboration. So that's how I encourage my students to do it. And usually, and I tell them they're probably going to have to send out 20 to 30 to 40 of these emails to get 4 or 5 responses. And this is coming from an American university. So, you know, if they have to send out 40 emails to get 4 responses, it's always a little bit more difficult when we get these emails from foreign students. So you might have to send out more, but don't feel bad. Like I said, my students, and these are some of the best students at our university, are only getting responses in maybe 10%. So don't feel bad and don't get discouraged. And also be realistic. If you don't have a great GPA, you're not going to Harvard. Think about the schools that you are going to apply for. And in the US, the bigger the school, typically the harder it is to get into. So there's lots of fabulous programs at smaller schools, regional campuses and things like that. Don't let the size of that university dissuade you or discourage you from applying to work with those people.
Thank you for the advice, wonderful advice. And I believe once they send different proposals to different universities, they want to adjust it in a way for each separate university, correct?
Yep.
Wonderful. And another question I have, we have about the assistantship that might be available at the PhD program. So maybe, Ling, you are the better person, and maybe Dr. Swanson can answer us also about this. In order to be eligible for the assistantship, research assistantship in our cases, because this is a PhD program, which is more typical, the research assistantships for those programs. So what the students need to have or to do?
Most of our, my office awards, just at CMU, we award about $3 million in assistantships every year. And so how you do it is there's often secondary applications that one needs to make. So you're going to apply to the university, but a lot of the programs, a lot of the departments are going to also have an additional application that you need to apply for the assistantships. So make sure when you're talking with an advisor, that with a possible advisor or somebody in the department, that you find out where you need to get those secondary applications as well. They are typically not they're not going to be associated with the primary application. They're often going to be only on the department's webpage or maybe through the College of Graduate Studies or something like that. So make sure you find out where those are. These are competitively awarded most of the time. So that means they're going to have the graduate committee in that department is going to go through and read everybody's application, and they're going to rank them as 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on down. And if we have 20 students who are applying and we have 6 assistantships to give out, we're going to offer it to the first one, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and then the other people will get admitted, but they won't necessarily get an assistantship. If you don't get an assistantship right off the bat, that doesn't mean you won't get an assistantship. Whoever is our #1 candidate in that program, they're probably going to be the #1 candidate somewhere else as well. And that program might offer them, and the student might want to go to that other program more than come to our program. So that means our top student might turn us down, which means now we'll go down to the 7th student. So now we'll be offering it to ranks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If our 3rd person turns it down, now we're going to go to 8. And in the US, there's a magical date, April 15th. This is essentially what we call Choice Day. After an offer has been made of support for an assistantship or anything like that, it can't be withdrawn until April 15th. So that means that on April 15th, anybody of those top 7 students who we offered an assistantship to, any of them who haven't said yes, we're going to say, okay, they obviously don't want us. Now we're going to start working our way down. So it can take a long time before you actually find out about those assistantships. And the best thing you can do on making yourself competitive is do some show that you've done some research in the field. A lot of these will be teaching assistantships, so you're going to have to be teaching. So if you can become a teaching assistant during your undergraduate or during your master's work, that's going to make you stand out. If you manage to get your name on a publication or you publish something yourself, That's going to make you stand out. Your GPA is going to make you stand out, and letters of recommendation. So make sure you are getting as strong of an application as possible for that. But realize it's really just often working our way down those. But also you have to have some patience.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the admission process, any admission process, requires a lot of patience. Ling, I think we can go with you now, and then if you can share the information about Central Michigan University and tell us about the university, and then we will get back to the questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. So can you see my slide up?
I think so, awesome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, good evening, everyone. This is Ling. I am the director for International Recruitment at Central Michigan University. So first, I want to thank, EducationUSA for this great opportunity, and also for the students who are here today. So Central Michigan University is located in Michigan. And as you can see in this map, we're right in the middle, and Michigan is a state that's surrounded by Great Lakes. So it's a great place to be if you are an outdoor person, and especially now in the summertime. So Central Michigan University is one of the biggest public university in the U.S. And we're also Carnegie classified doctoral research institution. That's why EducationUSA reached out to us and asked us to do a doctoral proposal today. So we have over 200 majors for undergraduate and close to 100 graduate programs here. So in the middle of the screen, you can see some of the majors that we have, from computer science to biology to psychology to fashion design, you name it. We have, over 200 majors for undergraduate, and we can't really list all of them there. So for a complete list of the programs, please, go to our website. So many international students, when they want to come to study in the U.S., they will ask those questions. Location, is that a safe place to be? Do I have, a lot of, activities that I could do over there? Two, is that affordable? Do you offer a scholarship? Three, what is the outcome? So do you guys have a good placement rate? And number five, probably, they want to know whether you have a good academic programs. So if you choose Central Michigan University, so all the answers to those questions are going to be yes, yes, and yes. So we have, we are a large institution. So we offer all the resources that you can imagine to make sure you will be successful. However, we pay close attention to our students. We're really here to make sure they can be successful. So once you are a CMU student, you will get a chance to work with wonderful professors like, Dr. Swanson, if you're interested in biology, or you will be able to, tackle vaccine, cancer vaccine, at our medical school or our health science programs. So we are really kind of student-centered institution. And you probably wonder, after, a great presentation Dr. Swanson did, and after I, my little kind of talk about CMU, you probably kind of wonder, well, that sounds great. How do I apply? And do you guys have any scholarship? Well, my slide is not working too well. So for undergraduate student, if you, as a public institution, we offer very, very affordable tuition. So as an international student without a scholarship, you're looking at around $20,000 per year for tuition. However, if you have a 3.3 GPA and you will only have to pay around $11,000 in tuition per year. If you are a high school student, want to come and study at our undergraduate level. So if you are a graduate student, and of course, Dr. Swanson talked about a graduate assistantship, that will be a very good thing to have, because if you get a full graduate assistantship, that means you can come to study at CMU for free. However, we do have a lot of programs that even though they couldn't offer graduate assistantship, but they have a very, very affordable tuition. A lot of our master's program, specifically MBA and MSIS, they offer a kind of like almost a scholarship to all the international students. So if you're interested in these two programs, the tuition is going to be close to $12,000 a year. And for the rest of the program, without a graduate assistantship or scholarship, it's going to be around $15,000 per year. So super, super affordable. And of course, we mentioned the graduate assistantship. And to apply to CMU, it's fairly simple. You can just go to apply.simich.edu, and you do have to send your transcripts to us. You can have it mailed to this address listed, on this slide, or you can have your school to send official transcripts via email to this address. And I didn't list the detailed requirement to apply as a graduate student because each individual department, they have a different requirement. So I would strongly recommend you to reach out to us and also reach out to the graduate programs if you're interested in specific graduate programs. And we do have a requirement for all the students, including the graduate student, for English proficiency. So you do have to have a 79 on TOEFL. IELTS requirement is 6.5, and we do take a Duolingo. So you do have to have 100 on Duolingo for full admission. However, we do have a great ELI programs here. So if you do not have a TOEFL of 79, IELTS of 6.5, you still can be admitted. You just, have to come and take an English placement test, and then you might have to take some additional English courses. So if you're interested in applying to CMU, reach out to EducationUSA office and they can help you, or just reach out to us. That's pretty much a wrap up, and I do want to share our contact information. I strongly recommend you to go to our website. That's where you can find all this information. And also, I would recommend you to follow us on our social media, or just to send us email. So thank you again for your time. Both Dr. Swanson and I will be here for a little bit longer to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ling. Thank you so much for the information. And I encourage everybody also to contact university if you have questions and you don't see the information on the website, which is I think a good way to find more about the graduate programs, about PhD programs, about the admission requirements. Ling, can you tell about GRE test, which is our students ask a lot? Would it increase my chances to be admitted or get financial aid? What about your university?
That is a very good question. I didn't really talk too much about a GRE or GMAT because for graduate programs, we don't have just one requirement for all individual programs. So, for example, if you are interested in biology, they might require, GRE for admission or for scholarship. However, if you are applying for MSIS, which is Information System, or MSA, which is, Masters of Science in Administration, you wouldn't have to submit it GRE. And this year, due to COVID, we do have programs like computer science and engineering. They actually waived the GRE requirement. However, if that program doesn't require GRE, I don't really think sending the GRE is going to increase your opportunity of getting accepted or scholarship. But for the programs that do require GRE, you will want to get a good score. But we do have, I didn't kind of mention here, because not a lot of students will submit a GRE if the program does not require GRE, right? However, we do have an out-of-state merit, we call it merit scholarship for our international students. So international students who have a TOEFL of 100 and a certain GRE or GMAT score and a 3.0 GPA, they can be qualified for that scholarship. However, if you apply for MBA or MSIS, because these two programs already offer that scholarship to all the international students, so even with the GRE or a higher TOEFL score, you wouldn't be qualified for additional scholarship. But if you're interested, let's say in computer science, and you have all the required test score, GPA, and you could be qualified for out-of-state merit scholarship for graduate international student. So for the details, please reach out to us and we'll be able to kind of help you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the information. So the advice is please reach out to the specific department and ask about the requirements, what they have for the admission. Dr. Swanson, my last question is for you about the publications. How important are publications for the research and PhD programs? Are they required for your specific programs, like in your university, and how many? Is there anything you can just add? Mm-hmm.
If you are applying for a PhD program and you already have a publication, you're going to stand out. That's a rarity. Even students who have completed a master's, most of the time in our field, we see people going from the master's straight into a PhD if they're going to do the PhD. Several people just stop at their master's and that's their terminal degree. But if they are going to go on, typically they go on very quickly after that. And because of that, if they did their master's, they still haven't published what was in their master's yet. So having people who are applying for PhD programs with publications of any sort is really going to make you stand out. It's a brilliant way to get yourself higher up on that tier of the rankings of those students. It doesn't have to be in the world's best publication. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be. We don't expect undergraduates to be necessarily publishing their undergraduate thesis in the top science or social science journal in the world. Just the fact that you've actually gone through and done all of that is really important. If you've written a small grant that you got some money for, that's going to make you stand out. So publications, not necessary to get in, but they can elevate you in the ranking with that. But if you don't have one, realize that just puts you in with 98% of the rest of everybody. It's the really few people who actually have any publications when they are applying. So it's not a big negative. Lacking publications is not a negative. Having publications, though, is a big plus, and it will definitely make you stand out there a bit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the information. And the time is up, and I'm really grateful for your time and for the information you provided. Thank you so much. And I believe that the information our audience received today will help them in the future. For those who are looking for PhD programs, there's so much wonderful information, so much of useful information, insights, and encouragement from you when you said don't be discouraged by silence in the replies. So please just do your best you can, and you will definitely receive a positive response at some point. So thank you so much, Ling. Thank you so much, Dr. Swanson. Have a great day to you, and have a great evening to everybody, and see you next time, next Thursday.
Bye, folks.